Hey, welcome back. It's your boy Will J. Let's get into some deck brewing shenanigans. Today we're gonna cover a badass villain from Commander Legends Battle for Baldur's Gate, Jon Irenicus, Shattered One. Jon Irenicus is a 4-mana value 3/3 elf wizard that reads at the beginning of our end step, target opponent gains control of up to one target creature we control. Put 2+1/+1 counters on that creature and tap it. It is now goaded for the rest of the game, and it also gains this creature can't be sacrificed. Then, whenever a creature we own but don't control attacks, we get to draw a card. So he's a card advantage engine, but a very unorthodox one in that there's a very specific hoop we must jump through to get cards. That first ability though is really what we're going to be focusing on, and the deck we're going to be brewing today is called You Will All Suffer for $65. I purposefully went for a budget build because as I was brewing, I realized that while this playstyle is unique and fun, it's also narrow. So this isn't something I'd recommend as being your only commander deck, but instead more of a supplementary one. You know, a change of pace type of deck that you can play when you want to switch it up a bit. Now before we get into themes and card specifics, I hope you can leave me a like and a subscribe because these really help out. We'll go over our usual themes of ramp, removal, and draw, but then we'll also go over our other themes of donations, donors, evasion, and something we like to call UBP or utilities, bombs, and pets. Jon Irenicus only costs 4, so we're going to want to focus on low curve rocks to get him out quickly. For this budget build, I still run Soul Ring and Arcane Signet, and the recent Mind Flayer's precon has also given us access to more affordable 2-drop rocks like Dimir Signet, Mind Stone, and Talisman of Dominance. Felwar Stone and Prismatic Lens are also solid options at 2-mana value that come in untapped, and Everflowing Chalice is a flexible mana rock that produces half of how much mana you sink into it. And I'm a fan of Commander's Quarter, so Wayfarer's Bauble is a great staple to run. Lastly, I also run Dream Devourer in this deck. While not a mana rock per se, this Demon Cleric lets us foretell cards early and then play them out later for cheaper. And because we're going to be running some pretty bad creatures, maybe we don't want them to stay too long on our side of the battlefield. It's hard to play control in a multiplayer game because the more you wait around to interact, you're less likely to push your plan forward. So we want to go for low-cost interactions such as an Offer You Can't Refuse, Wash Away, and Spell Pierce, which are all 1-drop counterspells. Meanwhile, Negate, Arcane Denial, and Saw It Coming are 2-drop counterspells. A lot of these budget counterspells hit non-creatures though. So once creatures hit the board, the form of removal we want to lean into is sacrifice effects. Demon's Disciple and Plague Crafter are 3-drop creatures that force sacrifices, and remember, the creatures Jon Irenicus gives have that can't be sacrificed clause. Vana's Hunger also forces sacrifices, and with the City's Blessing, is a semi-board wipe at instant speed. Tergrid's Shadow can be foretold early and later used as an instant mini board wipe as well. Feed the Swarm is a great staple I'd recommend because it removes creatures and enchantments. Enchantments being something black and blue both generally struggle with. Spectral Deluge is a budget mass bounce spell, and because it depends on our islands, there's a good chance that whatever we've donated is gonna stick onto the battlefield. Lastly, a pet card that fits into our forced sacrifices is Necrotic Hex. It's practically a board wipe, but it leaves us 6 2/2 black zombies that we can use to pressure the board afterwards. Jon Irenicus is a good source of card draw once he gets rolling, but we need to supplement that as well. Night's Whisper gives us a great rate at 2 for 2, and Behold the Multiverse can be foretold and gives us a scry 2, draw 2 for 2 as well. And Thirst for Discovery is a draw 3 for 3 at instant speed, although we'll need to discard a basic. And Fact or Fiction also lets us draw at instant speed. I like these instant draw spells because it lets us hold up mana to see if we need to counter anything first, or if we can just tap out to draw cards before we start our turn. A couple of creatures that will get us draws is Howling Golem, which I think is underrated because no one's gonna want to kill this thing, and if donated, gives us 2 cards. And Sig River Cutthroat can give us 1 to 2 cards too in 1 turn cycle. A really effective draw spell for longer games is Curse of Verbosity. While it runs the risk of being a feel bad because someone is gonna get targeted down, it fits into our forced aggro playstyle, and it's gonna draw us a lot of cards because everyone's gonna want to attack the cursed player. Now comes the fun part and the heart of our deck, the bad creatures we want to donate with Jon Irenicus. Cards like Phyrexian Negator and Hellcarver Demon are ultra powerful in this build, but they're also really pricey, and again, for a secondary deck, I don't know if you'd want to invest that much money. Another example is Taniwa, an older card that can also be devastating, but again, we can have just as much fun with more budget-friendly cards. Wretched Anurid is a 2-drop 3/3 that'll slowly drain our opponent, especially if someone else on the table is playing a creature token deck or something. Ebon Drake is a 3-mana value 3/3 flyer that'll drain our opponent for each spell played by any player. Rotting Registrar is a 3-mana value 7/6 that'll force a discard on their upkeep. Abyssal Persecutor is a huge 6/6 Flample Demon that only costs 4 that we actually wouldn't mind keeping, but as a donation, since Jon Irenicus adds that can't be sacrificed clause, it'll be hard to get rid of for our opponent. Desecration Elemental is a 4-mana value 8/8 with Fear that can wreck our opponent's board state, and because of Jon Irenicus, it won't be able to sacrifice itself to its own ability. Rust Elemental is a 4/4 flyer for 4 and is another creature that can wreck our opponent's board, but this time among their artifacts like their mana rocks. Liege of the Pit is a 7/7 Flample Morph creature that can be flipped for 4 black mana, and he has the old school demon contract of demanding a sacrifice, or else it deals its controller a ton of damage. If you'd notice, I'm generally trying to keep the curve low within that 2 to 4 mana range so that we can play these guys early and then in the next turn cycle play Jon Irenicus, who can then donate these guys at our end step. However, if we're running the Liege, then we gotta run the OG version, right? Lord of the Pit. I haven't seen this guy played in a hot minute, and so the throwback is just nostalgic for me. But if you don't share the sentiment, maybe Greater Harvester will be more up your alley, and it's probably a stronger choice because it forces sacrifices to its controller as well as the defending player if it connects. Also at the top of our curve is Asmodeus the Archfiend, a 6-mana value 6/6 that if given to an opponent who doesn't have black mana, essentially locks them out of any of their draws, including their draw step. Ooh, what a villainous thing to do. Now, as fun as it would be to torture our enemies with these crappy creatures, I'd like to point out that if our donated creatures end up killing the opponent we donated them to, they will not be exiled. Instead, they will return under our control. So on one hand, great, this means we can donate them again to another player with an additional 2+1/+1 counters. But if it's down to 1v1, well, I guess we gotta pray that our Lord of the Pit can close out the game for us like old times. Jon Irenicus will probably always be able to donate one thing because that triggers at our end step. However, there's a good chance he eats removal and we don't get to do that again until we can pay the tax man. Wrong Turn essentially lets us donate one of our creatures outright, granted without the goad, the counters, and the no sacrifice clause. And Legerdemain is a 4-mana sorcery that lets us swap an artifact or a creature with our opponent. Spawnbroker enters the battlefield and lets us swap out our bad creatures for a good one, and we can probably get whatever we want since we're running a lot of high power creatures. Daring Thief and Puka's Mischief are repeatable theft/swap effects that let us nab any good permanents for our bad ones. A crazy card which might end up being our undoing is Endless Whispers. When any creature dies, their controller essentially has to give it to someone else. It's not optimal, but it is fun, especially when there are bad creatures that no one wants. While all these donor cards don't give our bad creatures goad or the no sacrifice clause, it is worth mentioning that they will still trigger Jon Irenicus' draw trigger when they attack. Because our donated creatures are goaded, there's a risk that they die from regular old combat damage. To prevent that, while also making sure that they can keep pressure on the table, Dothi Embrace gives a creature Shadow, essentially making them unblockable. Aqueous Form is an aura that makes a creature unblockable, plus it lets us scry on the side as well. And Sly Investigator is a 4-mana value 2/4 that gives an opponent's creature unblockable while also goading them. And the Vow Cycle of Flight, Malice, and Torment all give some type of evasion and keeps us safe from the big beats of our own creatures if we donate them through some other means. For UBP, we're gonna sprinkle in some utility cards that'll help give the deck a bit more oomph. Swiftfoot Boots protects Jon Irenicus in the hopes of getting him to stick around to donate more of our creatures. Apprentice Necromancer and Viconia Drow Apostate are a couple of graveyard recursion cards that help give the deck some resiliency. Propaganda keeps us alive because this deck is likely gonna draw some early heat at casual tables. Cursed Disturbance gives us a board presence and might incentivize attacks to a player, although not to the level of Curse of Verbosity. And Irenicus' Vile Duplication is a versatile card that can clone any of our creatures, even Jon Irenicus himself, for a double draw or double donate effect. There are a couple of bombs I've included in this deck to help give it more reach. One is Mystic Reflection, which can turn our opponent's creatures or commanders into a copy of our bad creatures like an Ebon Drake. And since we're running a lot of sacrifice effects, then it's the perfect time to run Tergrid, God of Fright. She's scary for sure, and hopefully she'll give you enough resources from your opponents to close out the game. You Will All Suffer isn't the most powerful deck, it's geared more towards low to mid power levels, but I think when you play this build, the trick is to not take yourself too seriously. You might get targeted, or you might get away with it and pull out a win. I mean, who cares? The rewarding part, in my opinion, is gonna be able to pull off all the cool interactions you'll have with the table and being able to play bad creatures in a viable way. I'll be posting the deck list in the description down below, but excluding lands in our commander, this deck clocks in at $65.53. If you have some pricier staples lying around that you want to mix and match, then feel free to do so, and here's the shell you can refer to help guide you. 10 ramp spells, 13 removal, 8 draw, 11 donation, 6 donor, 6 evasion, 8 UBP, and 37 lands. And that's it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you get to try it out, let me know how it goes in your playgroup. Once again, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. And until next time, stay generous, stay Jon Irenicus, and stay inspired. See ya, pals.